Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Okay, guys. This feels like the opportune time to tell this little story. This happened to me, if you want to believe it or not. This was about 2 years ago. Note this is in Florida. I'm 17 at the time, and I've been wrestling for most of my life. This is amateur wrestling, singlets and all. Well, I've gotten into other sects of grappling, such as Sambo and Luchador, though no place in my hometown hosts Luchador. I ask around, and I find out someone on a national team I was on goes to his uncle's gym to train. His uncle used to be a luchador. I take this ripe-ass opportunity to get the address and drive down to Miami. This is where it gets weird, guys. First off, this part of town is not nice. Yeah, like a good percentage of Miami. Ruined businesses, hobos everywhere, abandoned buildings. Kinda spooky, you know? Well, I reach the address I was given, and it's an old warehouse, very large. Once I pull up, I can hear noises from inside, the beautiful sounds of luchador. I grab my gear and come in, finally meeting this luchador uncle of his. The old guy himself is terrifying. He must be in his late 60s, but he's built like a tank. Short, but able to toss someone if they pissed him off. He tells me they're holding a bit of a camp, and if I was willing to go get some clothes and essentials and come back, he'd be happy to let me stay with him. Prime opportunity. I took it. That day we trained hard. It was extremely fun, but I noticed some weird things during the course of the day. At one point, it seemed really dark outside, like it had suddenly become night. No one else noticed but the uncle and one other guy. There were about 6 other guys in there besides me and the uncle. Turning off a light in a certain room, that same light being on when I returned to the room, stuff running when it's not supposed to, most of it explainable to a certain degree. About 3/4 through the day, I get a weird feeling in the pit of my gut. You know that feeling? Kind of like when a storm's coming, or you're anticipating something. The strength of the feeling grows throughout the day, to the point where it's hindering my ability to perform. The guy tells me to go home and get my stuff, then come back. 8. I drive home, and as I'm nearing my hometown, that feeling leaves. I'm able to notice it lifting immediately. Stop by home, gather stuff, browse a bit of /x/ and check Facebook. Toss laptop into bag with clothes, laptop, and toiletries. I toss them into my car and begin the drive back. It's about 11 o'clock by the time I've got back to the warehouse gym. The old guy is waiting outside. I come out and greet him. We talk a bit, and he says we can just walk to his house. It's only about a 5-minute walk from the warehouse gym to his house. His house is quaint. Think those old homes you see on scenic tours in Georgia and the South. Not a plantation home, much smaller, but still the same type of architecture. Inside of this house is what you'd expect an old Mexican dude's house to be. Covered in crosses, Bibles laid everywhere, luchador masks on mannequin heads along one wall. Let me try to give you a picture of the setup of this house. It's like there's the front of the house, which is this living room. There's the kitchen off to the side on the left. Farther down is the bathroom. On the right of the house are 2 bedrooms. He gives me his kid's old room. Kid grew up and went off to join the military, I think. I get my stuff put out and come out. Something is off, though. The masks were switched around. I didn't remember the combination of each one, but I swear they were not in that order. The old guy is in the kitchen, so he couldn't have done it. My mind is just playing tricks on me. Screw it. Not gonna worry about it. I asked the old man about the masks, and he says, and I quote, "They are the masks of the weak, those I have beaten in the ring. A luchador without his mask is a man without his honor. Their honor is mine." I glanced nervously at the masks. They're starting to kind of creep me out. As we're talking, he's ordering us Dominoes using this old laptop thing was a dyno. He finishes the order and we go back to the living room. The guy has a very nice TV setup. Surround sound, a big-ass HD TV and on demand. We watched a few movies, some luchador-based, others like The House of Flying Daggers. All the movies were action. Suddenly I get that weird-ass feeling every time I look at the masks, the weird feeling in my gut. Pizza arrives. We eat and watch some more movies like IP Man. We finish our pizzas, then head to bed, tired as hell. The weird feeling in my gut has ceased. though this house is kinda giving me the willies at night. I'm sitting in my room with my laptop, playing an MMO with a couple of friends when I hear a loud bang outside. It makes me jump a teensy bit. I'm very worried. This neighborhood is not exactly a good one, and it could be an intruder. I look around for something to defend myself with. When I hear footsteps outside, I hear the old man's voice call out, "Anon!" I call back, come out, and we go down the hallway together, able to beat the crap out of whoever decided to mess with us. We came into the living room where we heard the bang. One of the luchador masks fell. The mannequin head was made of porcelain. It might have been. It shattered into a couple of large pieces upon impact. How it fell, I don't exactly know, but it was a golden mask laced with silver. It would have been a badass mask had I not had that feeling in my gut once more. The old man has a worried look on his face. He mumbles something along the lines of, "Not again." He turns and grabs one of the many crucifixes and hands me one, saying, "Sleep with this on your nightstand, Anon. Please." The look in his eyes is weird, like he's pleading. That night, I'm laying in bed thinking about the mask falling over. Suddenly, the feeling returns stronger than ever. Feel like I'm going to puke. I roll over out of bed and my head hits the floor. I'm such a jackass. I pass out right there on the floor. My dream during that passed out period was weird. I was looking through someone's eyes. I was in an old dilapidated building. There were stands filled with people, and I was sitting on the ropes of a wrestling ring. A man stood in front of me. He was wearing a luchador mask and bright golden pants. I'm not in control, kind of watching what's going on. I, who I'm seeing through, gets his ass handed to him. The guy reaches down and does something to his face. He brings his hand back up and he's holding a golden mask, laced with silver. Oh shit, gotta get out of here. Wake up, cold sweat. The old man is standing over me going, "Anon, did you say your prayers tonight?" In the spookiest way possible. I nope back into bed and mumble, "No, sir." I can't fall asleep. I go to practice the next day. Nothing considerable happens. At the end of the day, I book it out of there and back home, into the comfort of my own bed and no spooky masks.
The Bum and the Dog. This happened a while ago, and it is the most profound paranormal experience I've ever had. Be me, 20, midnight. Me and my friend and I decided to walk the train tracks behind the house. We walk for some time, get spooked by sounds at a pond, and decide to book it further. Armadillo Bro shows up. He is walking the tracks too and doesn't mind us. Some time passes. We are silent, just listening and walking. Armadillo Bro gets smoked by something. Bush noises and screaming ensue. We continued walking a little faster and mourned our friend, probably a gator because we Florida boys. The armadillo shows back up 5 minutes later, closer to us. Very concerned about this, we keep a bit of an eye on him and lose track of time. 2 a.m. now, we see a city limit sign and realize we have gone way too far, so we turn back. Armadillo Bro goes his own way. The walk back seemed like it only took 30 minutes. Hop off the tracks at a trailhead of a park in my neighborhood. Walking up the trail, trying to get home. Friend stops. I stop. Friend, WTF is that? Is that a cop? He was on probation. Me, no way, it's 3 a.m. What I see is a man and a dog about 50 feet in front of us, staring at each other. I yell, "Hey!" Both turn and look at me. The man runs off into the woods, abandoning the trail, no sound. The dog comes running at us, snarling. I put one hand on the ground, preparing to fight a random dog. Friend gets behind me, flicks his flashlight on. Dog begins to blur. It seems to be rolling rather than running. Hits shadow, gone. No trace of either of them could be found. No sound in the woods, no footprints, nothing.
Hello/X/. I come to you with a story and a problem, and I was hoping someone here could give some advice. It involves my wife, who is currently suffering from a chronic illness and may also be the victim of some type of parasitic shadow entity. I'll try my best to explain, but it requires some backstory. So essentially, my wife believes she picked up a negative entity as a child when she went to retrieve a ball from an abandoned property on a dare while she was living in Florida. Something about the place gave her an intense primal fear and even gave her nightmares, and she is certain that whatever this thing is, that's where it came from. Since then she would, though rare, experience consistent paranormal activity throughout the rest of her life. It would primarily be the appearance of a shadow-like being that would follow her, house to house, no matter where she lived. This entity had also purportedly been seen by her friends and family. The most dramatic occurrence was when the entity appeared and let out a loud demonic growl while she was with a group of friends. Outside of that, the paranormal aspect with it was rare and far between. Her life in general, however, was quite a mess. Rife with drug abuse, alcoholism, backstabbing family members, abusive relationships, you name it. If there's any truth to entities feeding off of negative energy, she was a buffet. On top of this, she has this near debilitating chronic illness for most of her life that wasn't diagnosed until just a few years ago. At the time, however, she never really put too much thought into it other than, weird stuff happens sometimes. That was until she had a chance encounter with a medium who stopped by the liquor store she worked at in Louisiana. The medium was checking out at the register when she looked at my wife, grabbed her by the shoulder and said something along the lines of, "Your aura is weak and gray, there's something feeding on you." The medium also went on to state that she luckily had another entity acting as a barrier, protecting her from the parasite's full power or something to that effect. This encounter had my wife questioning her prior experiences, and it was from then on she started looking deeper into it. Years later, the crazy lady at the liquor store would be somewhat vindicated by my own mother. You see, my mom is a fairly proficient astrologer. When my wife and I initially started dating, she asked my mom for a reading, and one of the first things she stated was that my wife had some kind of psychic vampire that's been attached to her almost for life. However, there was a subtle protective influence as well. Almost verbatim what the medium claimed. I don't recall the exact placements that had my mom come to this conclusion, though I know it involved Neptune and a stellium in Aquarius 12th house my wife has. Adding on to circumstantial proof of this thing existing. Not terribly long ago, my 3-year-old son had this brief stint where he claimed to be seeing a big ghost he called MEM, in an incredibly matter-of-factual way. He would often come up to me, grab me by the finger and drag me to my bedroom and make me look under the bed. MEM's down here. Which of course I see nothing and I have to pretend there is. Anytime we ask questions like, what does MEM look like? Where does MEM come from? My son just replies, MEM big ghost. MEM's here. It wasn't until my mother came to visit we got some more concrete answers. He pulled the same routine with her, except he took her into his room. He showed her a novelty light-up Halloween mirror we put in there for him as a night light. MEM live here. MEM go in head. Points to forehead. MEM give bad dream. The messed up thing is, he's had night terrors nearly every night since he was a small bean. Not taking chances, I threw the mirror away, and curiously he hasn't mentioned MEM a whole lot since. I'm not certain if MEM and my wife's entity are the same, or if MEM is just the concoction of my over-imaginative little boy, but given the circumstances I still found it quite eerie. As for myself, since being with my wife, I've had a few instances where I thought I might have seen something out of the corner of my eye a few times. Usually just an amorphous dark blob that vanishes as soon as I glance over. A few times I've woken up and thought I've seen a shadow under the crack of my bedroom door, but not anything crazier than that. The night my son told my mom about MEM going in his head, my wife and I speculated on MEM being her supposed parasite entity. Being proactive, I pulled out my phone and looked up ways to remove negative spirits. When I kid you not, I instantly broke out in hives. Primarily on my neck, back, stomach, and ankles. It felt like I had fire ants from hell biting me from under my skin. They lasted for about 4 hours. I've gotten spontaneous hives like that maybe twice in my life. It could have been a coincidence for sure, but honestly, what are the chances? It's been the past few weeks, however, that have been the real kicker. My wife's illness has recently flared up so severely she's physically incapable of taking care of herself, let alone our kids. I still had to work. So she was staying at the hospital while my children stayed with another family. For about a week I had the house to myself. The first few nights were quiet, though I was seeing the eye corner shadows a little more frequently. A few times my children's toys would turn on by themselves when I was on the other side of the house. Had my glasses disappear one morning only to find them in one of my wife's plant pots. Then I saw it. I finally saw it. Full frontal. I got up in the middle of the night for a snack, pickle spear wrapped in pepper jack cheese. When I turned back to get back to bed, there it was. In the hallway. It was about 7 feet tall, jet black and amorphous with a sort of white smear where a face should be. I tactically shit bricks for about half a second when it disappeared in a blink. I stepped outside and chain smoked until I felt it was safe enough to go back and sleep. It unironically looked similar to pick related, but instead of a face it was a smeared blob with 2 dark spots that could have been eyes. Only other notable thing to happen since then was the other night when I went out for a smoke. I saw what looked like an orange-sized purple orb. It had a visual texture similar to that of sheen on oil. I stared at it for a fraction of a second when it popped like a bubble. It looked very similar to pick related. My wife is back home now, but her condition is still declining. I've seen her have flare-ups, but this one is unprecedented. She looks like she is wasting away in front of me in real time, and the drugs the hospital gave her don't seem to be helping. I'm genuinely scared for her this time. I wouldn't go so far to say that this MEM demon parasite ghost thing caused her ailment, but I feel like there's a real probability its presence is exacerbating her condition. I haven't told her about what I've seen the past week, as I'm sure it will only stress her out, and she has this thing about talking about it. She thinks it will make it more active. I'll be taking her to her mother's soon for a week so she can see the kids. Is there anything I can do to abate this thing while she's away? If I need to find a medium/psychic/healer, etc. How can I make sure they are reputable and not just a new age hippie charlatan? Is there any way to strengthen the positive protective entity, if it exists? I feel like she's going to have a much harder time healing if this thing is still lingering about the periphery. Thank you for your time/x/. I appreciate anyone's comments or counsel on this situation.
I'm from a real small town in Florida called Wewahichka. It's in Gulf County, about 50 miles southwest of Tallahassee on the Panhandle. The area has lots of lakes and rivers. We lived on several acres in the middle of nowhere. We had dirt roads my whole childhood. At the time, we had a single wide trailer. Lots of people in our community were complaining about an upright creature terrorizing them at night and stealing livestock and pets. My parents were city folks that moved into the area before I was born and opened a business, so my parents told me it was just stories to scare us because we were outsiders. At the time when this happened, I was 14 years old, and I had a younger brother that was 5 years old. One night in October 2004, my dad and I were watching TV. My brother was in bed. My mom was in the kitchen. We had one bedroom, and I had to pass the kitchen and my brother's room to get to the bathroom. My brother was sitting up in bed and he was crying. I tried to console him because I didn't want to get him in trouble for not sleeping. He whispered to me that a man was looking in his window. I looked out the window, and to my horror, I saw a pair of yellow glowing eyes watching us. So I grabbed my brother up. I knew my dad was in the living room and he kept a gun on the kitchen counter. I yelled to my dad that some sicko was looking in the window at my brother. Just then, I saw his whole face. It looked like a Neanderthal man with long brown hair. And it looked terrifying. His face was at the bottom of the window. I saw this massive chest and abdomen. It must have been 9 feet tall. My dad burst out on the front porch with a gun in his hand, and he fired several times. It looked at my dad for a moment, then ran for the tree line. My dad then came in, and my mother and brother were crying because of the sound of the .44 Magnum. My parents told me to go to bed and to take my brother with me. I overheard my parents talking. They didn't call the cops because they didn't know what it was. It was not human. My mother told my father, tomorrow I want all the trees gone. Not a single one taller than you can stay. He reluctantly agreed. He called in every friend and every favor and had 7 acres removed by sundown on Saturday. I had 2 friends close in age. One lived a mile away and the other 2 miles away. The closest came down that Saturday morning, and I asked him if he heard the gunshots the night before. I told him it was my dad. My mother came out and told me to stay out of the woods. She was going into town with my brother to buy curtains and blinds, which was something we really didn't need before. But since this happened, we put curtains up. After my mother pulled away, we got our friends, and I guess they basically pulled together their friends so they could go look. So we grabbed our guns and our machete. We knew the woods really well. We backtracked my yard and picked up on a trail. We spotted blood at the tree line. My father was washing away blood from the side of the mobile home, and so we went back into the woods following the blood. As we walked, we came across a crude shelter with the remains of what looked like trash. This thing was stealing trash and taking it to this little crude shelter. We followed the trails for hours. We heard a howl and a scream like no other we'd heard before. My father must have heard it and grabbed his buddies, and they raced into the woods with their guns in hand. They looked terrified when we finally crossed paths. He said they saw the blood trail and asked what we found. We told them about the shelter, and we took them where we'd been. We had been so keen on following the trail, we had never noticed the carcasses of deer and dogs high in the trees. My father chopped down the shelter and urinated all over it. One of his friends said that they had to mark to take back our land. It sounded crazy, but I looked up to this man, and he seemed to know what he was talking about. The 6 of us made a pact that it was a bear, and to never talk about it again. As we moved back to our house, we heard the howl again, and it was mad. It sounded closer this time. Our fathers told us to run. The 3 of them were side by side, firing at something. Of course, we didn't go far. Whatever it was died that afternoon. My dad told me to get a few shovels and be quick about it. We didn't want anyone to see a thing. I was the only one they let approach it because I had already seen it through the window. We took turns digging the hole. It was a Bigfoot, 9 feet or taller and so wide. I could not jump over it. It was a male. His face was all shot up, but its upper lip was 5 inches from the base of his nose to the opening. Its arms were as big as my dad's legs. His fingers were as wide as Coke cans. Its feet were longer than the barrel of my shotgun. We buried it and left for my house. Our mothers were waiting for us and frantically asked what it was. We said that it was a bear and it was injured, so we put it down and buried it. We didn't want to get in trouble with the game warden. That's what we told him, and I think my mother knew the truth, but it was best not said.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.